Part 33. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 333. Ma Qi cursed and walked out of the door. After Ma Qi left, Su Tong dared to show up, hugged the cheap mother's waist with a sad face, cried and said, "No, mother, Shenji Camp, what the hell is that place? If you ask me to work there, it will cost me my life." Su Tong really didn't know where Shenji Camp was, but he could still understand the word subordinate. To put it bluntly, it is to work as a bodyguard for others, to serve others, and when you have enough to support yourself, you don't want to play in this great capital, and you go to work as a slave for others. So there is nothing you can do in this place. Yudao means that one thing will bring down another. Ma Qi is in charge of the imperial army and is very majestic outside. But at home, he is most afraid of his wife. However, what this wife is most afraid of is the incompetent Ma Hongwen. Seeing her son start to behave and roll around, the grandmother was afraid that he would cause trouble again, so she repeatedly comforted him, "Don't move around, be careful of the wound." After finishing speaking, he sighed and said, "It's not like you don't know your father's temper, but you are right. The Shenji battalion spends all day playing with foreign guns and cannons. I heard that it killed more than a dozen people not long ago. It's really not appropriate for you to go there, so mom can go talk to your dad and see if we can find you a leisurely job." With the eldest grandma gone, Su Tong happily gained 20 completion points. At this rate, completing this side mission is just around the corner. Now that everyone was gone, there was no need to continue pretending to be sick. He jumped up from the bed and walked to the mirror to take a closer look at his current appearance. Perhaps because of his good genes, this dandy Yanei is quite good looking. He has a fair face with sharp edges, thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a tall nose. He is almost carved from the same mold as Ma Qi. It's just that Ma Qi's eyes are not angry and intimidating, but the corners of Ma Hongwen's eyes are more like a grandma's, looking a bit delicate and exaggerated. Just as he was looking in the mirror, De Ya slipped into the room and returned to the entrance of Su Tong Hall. "Headmaster, someone is coming from outside. He is a eunuch, and he seems to be here to deliver the imperial edict." De Ya looked like she was still frightened. The imperial edict was not a vulgar thing. This thing carried the luck of the emperor. De Ya said she was a fairy, but in fact she was a goblin. She was most afraid of this kind of thing. Once she encountered it, she would inevitably break it. She has a tail. Imperial decree. Su Tong's eyes wandered. He casually took off the robe on the shelf and walked out, quietly groping to the front yard and the main hall. He originally wanted to see what the imperial edict looked like, but when he fumbled through it, the edict had already been read out. He tilted his head and looked inside. In the room, Ma Qi was chatting happily with a eunuch wearing a green mandarin jacket. Su Tong glanced at it. This eunuch had a horse face, triangular eyes, and looked like he was not easy to get along with. A white silk scarf, paired with that mean look that pretends to be charming, looks disgusting. There were two little eunuchs following behind. The little eunuchs were wearing half-gray waistcoats. One was holding a fly whisk and the other was holding an incense burner. They stood there like wood. Just now, Ma Qi arrived unexpectedly, and I didn't have the chance to take a closer look at the luck of my cheap dad. Now, when I took a closer look, I found that my dad had good luck. His luck was condensed into a green bamboo, and it actually seemed to be rising. Immediately, I looked at the eunuch again and found that the luck on top of the eunuch's head was not so good. It was actually a piece of chicken rib, and it looked like he was an outcast who would be abandoned at any time. But that's how it is in the inner palace. Today you are favored and you can reach the sky in one step, but tomorrow you are out of favor and your body is gone. That person doesn't live cautiously. After watching it for a while, Su Tong felt that it was boring. Ma Chi's chat with the eunuch was just like doing Tai Chi. They chatted for a long time without saying a word to the main topic. Just as he was about to walk out, he heard a whisper outside the door in the distance. Walking in the direction, I saw the servants of my house gathered around, whispering to each other. Su Tong calmly walked aside and listened with pricked ears. It turned out that someone was telling fortunes for these servants. The 4 lines of birth overcome the Gan and general, seeking wealth cannot be achieved, and ordinary people lose money and worry about illness. Zhongyang governs oneself, and Zhongying governs the wife and family. Shen overcomes the side, although it is rare to ask for wealth from other hands, the victim will be late. Hey, Dia at the entrance of the hall pricked up her ears and said with some surprise, "This is Dajing Cao." The golden mouth formula of De Luren is also called gold in the Xiu. It is called golden mouth formula in North China, and it is called golden mouth formula in Northeast China. As the saying goes, the golden mouth prophecy refers to this. Brother Fu Wen, you are destined to have a hard life. Money doesn't last long, but you are in good health and you may still have a chance in your later years. A clear voice came from the crowd. Servant Fu Wen slapped his thigh. Hey, let me tell you, my boss is not young anymore. Why is he never rich? Everyone knew that Fu Wen couldn't keep money. The monthly rewards fell into his hands one day, and they were all spent the next day. It was exactly what the little father-in-law said, and everyone came immediately interest. Little father-in-law, please help me take a look again. And me, and me. Several servants gathered around and took out their money, hoping to get a fortune. For servants like them, they don't dare to think about what the future will be like. If they can live to understand, it will be a worthwhile trip. Su Tong stood on tiptoes behind and listening and watching at the same time. Listen to what the other party says and see how the luck on the heads of these servants changes. Chrysostom predicted that this thing was very strange, and it was the guy who ate in the Midas section. The strange thing was that it was not a bad thing for him. When he calculated it, Su Tong saw that the fates above the heads of these servants seemed to be frozen. You must know that people's destiny is constantly changing. People often say that there are 1 destiny, 2 luck, and 3 feng shui. These 3 all have fixed regular changes. It's like you are working as a security guard today, reading novels every day, and suddenly your mind is enlightened and you want to write a novel. Once you write it, it will become a hit, and your destiny will change accordingly. However, when the other party said this, he found that the fate numbers above Fu Wen and others' heads had suddenly frozen. Qi Men sensed that the numbers were lifeless, as if they were no longer affected by any external influence. In other words, their calculation means that from now on, their fate is fixed. Unless there is a great chance, this will be the case for the rest of their lives. Why? After Fu Wen finished calculating his fortune, he squeezed through the crowd with a disappointed look on his face and walked back with his head lowered. As a result, he was held down by someone's shoulder after he took only 2 steps. He looked up. "Oh, sir." Before Fu Wen could shout out, Su Tong covered his mouth, took out a piece of silver from his sleeve, weighed it in his hand, and threw the silver into Fu Wen's hand. "For your reward." Fu Wen's hand sank. The silver was at least 10 taels, which was more than his 2 years' salary. When he was about to kneel on the ground and kowtow to Su Tong's face suddenly darkened. "This silver is not given to you for free. I will give you a piece of silver today, and you will pay me back the silver in a month, plus 2 cents of interest. If you still don't come back." Su Tong squinted his eyes and looked up and down Fu Wen's body, grinning, "I'll peel off your skin." Ah! Hearing this, Fu Wen's face suddenly froze with joy. He had just counted on his front foot and couldn't keep the money in his hand. When his back foot encountered such a thing, his face suddenly brightened and darkened. Did he know his young master's temper? Just when he was at a loss, Su Tong took the silver back from his hand. "Young master, I borrowed this silver from you. I'll give you 5 cents as a profit. Let's get together at the end of the month for you. Now Fu Wen's mind was a little confused. He wanted 2 cents of interest on the money he borrowed, and then he borrowed it back and paid himself 5 cents of interest. Over and over again, he earned 3 cents of interest. Although he didn't know what the young master was doing, he gave him a sum of money for free. Fu Wen immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Su Tong. "Thank you, master. Thank you, master. Oh, master." The group of servants in front heard the movement behind them and looked back, only to find Su Tong standing at the door. His face changed greatly, and he asked Su Tong to say hello. Su Tong ignored these people, patted Fu Wen on the shoulder and said, "I see you are quite smart. Go and tell the manager that you should stop guarding here and go into the inner palace to do some purchasing." When everyone heard this, their expressions became strange for a moment. Didn't they say they had a hard life? Why, as soon as he turned around, he was promoted to the purchasing position by the young master. Purchasing is the most important job in the government. Normally, several big managers would break their heads for this job. Now, with the young master's careless words, it fell on the head of the doorman Fu Wen. This is such good luck, right? As soon as these words came out, everyone's already frozen luck actually started to come alive again. At the same time, his proficiency in Chi Men increased by 30 points. In fact, this Chrysostomian prophecy has a lot of psychological implications. It says that if you have no money in your life, you will just do nothing every day, start cheating, and break things. Not to mention having wealth, having a life is considered good. It has been fixed since then. To put it bluntly, as the old saying goes, if you believe it, you have it, if you don't believe it, you don't have it. Fortune teller, your calculations are not very accurate. Su Tong squinted his eyes and looked behind him, only to see a little eunuch standing there with his head lowered. He walked forward and bent over and said to the little eunuch, "As if I was sure of you." When all the servants heard this, they immediately understood that the young master was trying to make things difficult for the young father-in-law. Their young master has such a moody temper, and he lets this temper do whatever he wants. He obviously values Fu Wen, but in fact he just wants to make things difficult for the young father-in-law. He deliberately goes against them, and after figuring out the link, everyone immediately becomes interested in Fu Wen. The shitty luck will be relieved. All of them tilted their heads and looked at the little father-in-law behind them, showing expressions of gloating. This art of learning is just for fun. The slave is not good at it, which makes the young master laugh. Although the young father-in-law was displeased at having his yi skills broken, he was just a young eunuch, and the young man in front of him was the young master of the March family. He could not afford to offend him, so he hurriedly apologized. As he spoke, he raised his head and smiled apologetically at Su Tong. Su Tong didn't pay attention at first, but when the little eunuch raised his head, his heart skipped a beat and he was startled. He said in shock, "Oh my God, it's this dead eunuch again, why did I meet him here?" Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 334. When it comes to who the person in front of him is, Su Tong never imagined that this person turned out to be Li 11. Although Li 11's appearance at this time is very different from when he was old, the eyebrows and the expression are almost exactly the same. Looking at the luck on the top of this guy's head, it looks like a black tiger cub with its tail curled up, trembling in the corner. That's right, the official black tiger's destiny is him. However, compared to Li 11 in the previous script, where the black tiger was fierce and roaring, Li 11 at this moment was still at the grasshopper-like stage. Anyone with a little bit of power can be crushed to death with one finger. Seeing that young Master Ma in front of him was silent, Li 11 raised his eyelid slightly and said tentatively, "Master Ma, are you also interested in Yi Shui?" "Hee hee, I was just joking with you." After speaking, he glanced back at Fu Wen and raised his lips. I think this father-in-law is right. From tomorrow onwards, you can go to the backyard and clean the toilet. Ah! Fu Wen, who had been full of joy just now, suddenly fell down after hearing this. This happiness came so fast that he didn't even have time to carefully browse through the product before he was kicked into the latrine. The other servants even snickered secretly when they saw this. A young master is a young master after all, and they will never be able to learn the speed of falling out in 8 lifetimes. Su Tong doesn't care about Fu Wen's mood, he only cares about improving the completion of the task. He looked up and down at Li 11 in front of him and asked with a smile, "Where does my little father-in-law work? Why do you still have the time to study this thing?" Li 11 had long heard that Ma Hongwen was moody, but he didn't expect that this guy's betrayal was as unpredictable as his street tricks. He heard that he was assassinated yesterday, and now he was standing in front of him, showing off his power. But, it's true that good people don't live long, and disasters stay for thousands of years. Li 11 cursed in his heart, but he didn't dare to offend Ma Hongwen. If you were another official, you wouldn't have to be so humble. I am from the palace, so what if you are an official? But Ma Hongwen's father is Ma Chi, who is in charge of 50,000 forbidden troops. Apart from the masters, he has the most power in the palace. He can kill himself with just a snap of his fingers. Today, Manager Pan came to deliver the order. It is said that the Empress Dowager Cixin issued the order, allowing Ma Chi to annex the Forward Battalion and Firearms Battalion to expand the army and train troops. Although there was no direct official title, the power was expanded 3 times than before. You must know that since Teju entered the pass, there are really only a handful of people in the Han family who can sit in this position. Immediately Li 11 did not dare to be careless and said hurriedly, "Back to the young master, the young one is currently working as an errand in the memorial office, and will soon be transferred to the imperial prison to serve." For fear of delaying the matter, he just made a last-minute effort and showed off in front of the young master. It's really a shame. Damn it. In fact, the Zhuyi Bagua does not say that people are not allowed to learn it, but there are many taboos about many things. At least if someone in the palace learns this, he might be labeled as a deceiver. But Li 11 quickly explained that he was going to work in Kintian prison immediately, which was an excuse for himself. Of course, Su Tong knew that this mission traitor was probably more than just improvising, but he didn't want to expose him. After hearing his words, his heart moved. Qin Tianjian, this place is not simple. Listening to the master's wishes, Qin Tianjian is in charge of weather, divination, calendar making, and even holds a roster of strangers in the world. All strangers whose names are named must obey orders obediently. Even after they were liberated, there were still some old-timers who regarded the orders of the Kintian prison as imperial edicts and dared not disobey them. Otherwise, how could Li 11 and Qianshu summon so many old guys? Before the two of them said a few words, Su Tong heard the servants behind him shouting the master's name. Looking back, he saw Ma Chi and the eunuch walking out of the door. Ma Chi's face suddenly darkened when he saw his son. "Naijan, you don't stay in the backyard, and you want to go out and cause trouble." As soon as Su Tong saw Ma Chi, he immediately shrank his head and stood aside with his head lowered without daring to speak. Ma Chi glared at him, turned around and raised his hands to the eunuch beside him, saying, "The dog is so rude, it makes eunuch Pan laugh." After speaking, he scolded in a cold voice, "What are you still doing standing there? Why haven't you come to salute Mr. Pan?" When Su Tong heard this, he quickly lowered his head and saluted eunuch Pan. He, it's true that a tiger father has no dog son. Your son is truly a talented person. According to our family, he will definitely be a pillar of the country in the future. Thank you for the compliment, father-in-law." Su Tong quickly clasped his hands and thanked her, his eyes darting around as he wondered what he was thinking. "Eunuch Pan, you're welcome. If this child doesn't understand the rules when he enters the palace, you should give him some advice, Ma Chi said affectionately, holding Eunuch Pan's hand. Su Tong saw it with both eyes. With just a hand in hand, 2 big gold ingots fell silently into Eunuch Pan's cuffs. Hey, this. Eunuch Pan raised his eyebrows and was about to say something. Ma Chi held Eunuch Pan's hand with an expression that said, I understand the rules. There are always etiquette. Oh, okay, if that's the case, we won't be polite. After Eunuch Pan finished speaking, he took the whisk from the little eunuch beside him and swept it gently. Let's go. After the group of eunuchs left, Ma Chi looked at Su Tong with a dark face. Don't come in with me yet. Ma Chi brought Su Tong to the living room, picked up the teacup in his hand and took a sip. The doctor said your injury is not serious. After a few days of rest, you can go to the Ministry of War to report on your work. Master. The eldest grandma was standing behind the door at some point. When she heard this, her face almost turned black. All the good things she said before were in vain. Ma Chi frowned and could only say, don't worry, let him go to Chin Tian prison to do a casual job when the time comes. As long as he is looking for death, he won't cause any trouble. After listening to what Ma Chi said, the eldest grandma finally put on a good face and ignored Su Tong's winking look at her. She sat on the chair and thought for a moment. It's okay. Although it's the Forbidden Army, in Kintian the prison is on duty and it's far away from the harem, so I don't have to worry about causing any trouble. After saying that, he said to Su Tong in a somewhat deliberation tone, my son, you are not young anymore. It is time for you to go on an errand to be the emperor's retinue. I am afraid that you will break the rules carelessly. When the time comes, our family will you can't even save your head. In your father's position, there are so many people below watching, so you must not be stupid. Mom. I don't want to go. Su Tong pouted, his face full of displeasure, but he was already thinking about it. Li 11 was also in the Kintian prison. It just so happened that the accounts from the last time had not been settled yet, so he continued to settle the script with this guy. I don't know if I can meet Senju. If I do, he. Just as he was thinking about it, Ma Chi waved his hand and threw the teacup in his hand over. What's the matter? If you don't want to go, just come with me into the forward camp. It just so happens that I want to expand the army, so I will drag you in first and let you see what military law is like. Seeing her son turning pale with fright, the grandmother slapped the table and said, why are you yelling? This is not your military camp. After saying that, he pulled Su Tong and walked out, making Ma Chi's face turn blue and white with anger. The eldest grandma took Su Tong back to his room, found 2 more maids for him, and gave him 200 taels of silver for him to spend. While Su Tong was enjoying the rapid increase in task completion, while looking at the real money and silver in his hand, as well as the 2 beautiful little maids, he couldn't help but shout from the bottom of his heart, it's good to have a mother. Master. As soon as the grandma left, he heard someone calling him outside the door. Su Tong took a quick look and remembered that this was his follower Duan Cheng. There are not many memories about him, but every bad thing behind Ma Hongwen has his shadow. Su Tong looked intently and saw that this guy had pretty good luck on top of his head, but there was actually a kid with a black head and a grimace hidden in his luck. The kid had small eyes and a big mouth. He was hiding on top of this guy's head. When he saw Su Tong, he started talking like, what are you saying? As soon as Duan Cheng entered the door, he motioned with his eyes to the 2 maids to go down, then walked to the door again, made sure that no one was outside, and then closed the door. The man came to Su Tong's side and said, Master, the boy who assassinated you yesterday has been put in prison. I have arranged for someone to kill him tonight without leaving his body intact. Su Tong didn't bother to pay attention to Ma Hongwen's previous nonsense. After hearing Duan Cheng's words, he just frowned and hummed. But after hearing this, Duan Cheng was stunned for a moment, and looked at Su Tong in confusion. Master, what is wrong? Mission completion -5. When Su Tong heard the prompt, his eyes instantly became cold. He glanced sideways at Duan Cheng. Seeing the guy looking at him suspiciously, he grinned and said, Duan Cheng, you did a good job. Come on, I'll reward you. You have one thing. Duan Cheng's eyes lit up, and he moved his head forward, rubbing his palms back and forth. Is this what I should do, you? Before Duan Cheng could finish his words, Su Tong suddenly stretched out his hand, his fingers like hooks, and pinched Duan Cheng's throat. Duan Cheng was shocked and instinctively wanted to struggle. But who would have thought that the young master, who usually had no strength to tie a chicken, would have his wrist like an iron hoop, making him unable to move. Then he twisted his wrist and heard a click. Duan Cheng stared at Su Tong with his eyes wide open, as if he was seeing a stranger. His neck was weakly tilted to the side, and he was completely lifeless. Idiot! Su Tong dared to say that the people who knew Ma Hongwen best in the world were not necessarily his cheap parents, but this little follower who was inseparable and took Ma Hongwen to eat, drink, whore and gamble. This guy knows Ma Hongwen's habits very well, even better than Ma Hongwen himself. Do you think there is such a person who, in order to get benefits, does nothing all day long and just follows you around to figure out your preferences? How can he not understand you? Su Tong didn't want to stay with such a person. Su Tong threw the body on the ground and was not relieved after the killing. After all, this era has not yet entered the age of ending law, and there are all capable people in the world. Otherwise, the script world will not remind itself that once the mission fails, life will be in danger. To be on the safe side, Duan Cheng's soul was also pulled out by him, and the body was thrown into the prop book. The soul. Su Tong raised his head and glanced at the entrance of the hall above his head, and threw it in as rubbish. No matter how powerful you are, you can't break into the entrance of my hall to look for it. However, something he didn't expect happened at this time. Duan Cheng's soul was thrown into the hall. The golden furnace in the hall actually raised a stream of green smoke. The green smoke curled up and directly Duan Cheng's soul was sucked into the furnace. Then there was a loud noise in the stove, as if something was rolling down. Following the sound, Ya looked under the stove and found an inconspicuous hidden compartment under the stove. After opening it, 2 more pills were found inside. Here comes the pill. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 335. There are 2 pills, one is green with purple in it, and has golden texture on it. As soon as this thing came out, Ya and Fa Cai sniffed it vigorously, as if they were all ecstatic after just one sip. On the contrary, the black pill was colorless and odorless, with a black light inside and out. Ya quickly separated the 2 pills and found that the black one was still warm. It must have been refined just now, while the green pill was refined at some point and fell into the furnace. Not found. Su Tong was quite surprised when he saw this. He had studied this treasure furnace several times, but he didn't find a hidden compartment underneath. Quickly asked Dia to take out these 2 things and throw them into the prop book for a look. Ruya Swixendan. I wish you well as I wish. Those who eat it will receive a special buff blessing. The duration is unknown and the effect is unknown. For non-player consumption, you can obtain the effect of enlightening all things and awaken an ability randomly. If you mix the powder with rootless water, you can create a simple regenerating spring. Huashenquan, it has the ability to catalyze plants, and has a certain probability of making plants psychic. After reading the introduction of this elixir, Su Tong suddenly remembered it. He remembered that when Bai Lushan jumped into the jar, the jade Ruyi in his arms turned into a puff of green smoke and got into the furnace. Afterwards, I searched for a long time in the furnace but couldn't find it. I didn't expect that this thing had already turned into pills. After thinking about it carefully, the boy said at the beginning that the Yuruyi could not be brought out of Bilashan. Now it seems that either the boy was lying to him, or he was so lucky that Yuruyi was refined into a pill. In the end, Bilushan can be brought out. No matter which one it is, it doesn't matter now. This thing is a good thing, but you still need to think carefully about how to use it. Take another look at another black mud ball. Little man pill. The little man's pill, the little man's pill, are swirling in the ears of the villain. During the day, they look at each other with blank stares, and at night, when the empty room is empty, the concubine's voice makes her happy. How to use it, crush it, and light it? After inhaling the smoke for 10 minutes, you will be blessed with negative destiny and the villain will cause trouble. Needless to say, you should know that this thing must be something burned out of Duan Cheng's soul. As soon as Su Tong thought about it, the little man pill was left to gather dust in the prop book. Although this thing had no lethality, it was also difficult for ordinary people to notice the difference. He might not know when it would come in handy, so he would keep it for now. As for Ruyi Suksan pill, Su Tong thought about it for a while. It's a bit wasteful to eat this thing by yourself. Although it can add a buff, the buff lasts for a while. The most important thing is that you don't know what kind of buff you are adding. I don't know the effect of the blessing. Is it longer, thicker, or improved endurance? This is very annoying. In contrast, it would be better to maximize profits and give the elixir to Dia and the others. If you can awaken an ability, it is equivalent to adding a skill to yourself. And he really cares about the thing called Huazheng Spring. Don't forget, there was a fruit he brought back from Bilashan. The fool ate the fruit and kept the remaining core for himself. If you can use the metamorphosis spring to plant fruit cores, perhaps the benefits will far exceed your expectations. After thinking for a moment, Su Tong waited in the room until Jixiang came back in the afternoon. Although Jixiang has no fighting ability, he is good at gathering information. As the king of rats, all rats must call him ancestor. In this capital, if there are more people than people, it is rats. It only took Jixiang a day to make these mice his eyes and ears, bringing a lot of news to Su Tong. For example, there is also Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in the capital city. Jixiang was almost noticed by a young man halfway. Although the other party did not find it, he glanced at the place where it was hiding, which shocked Jixiang. If they were to catch me, I might not feel like I could run away. Su Tong doesn't find this strange. The current situation in the capital is more complicated than City L in the previous scenario. There are foreigners, reformists, and a group of conservatives. It's a mess like a hodgepodge. There have been frequent murders recently. According to the rats, a group of people from the White Lotus sect, under the banner of expelling foreigners and protecting China, burned down 2 dyeing factories and killed many workers. In addition, there have been many foreigners in the capital recently, preaching everywhere, and they seem to have conflicted with the monks of Phwa Temple, and almost got into a fight. Su Tong plucked peanuts, drank tea, and listened to Jixiang telling these things one by one, just like listening to a book. When talking about steam engines, Su Tong asked Jixiang specifically and found that this era was not exactly the same as what he was familiar with. Xiang's enthusiasm for steam engines far exceeded his expectations. Not only trains, but also used in all aspects of life, such as steam cars, steam guns, and even steam single-person aircraft, which look like a steampunk-era style. However, he felt relieved when he thought about the prompt he got when entering the script, "Please do not take your seat." Obviously, in this magically modified script world, using the original history as a reference is a wrong idea. Then have you found any news about Gao Zhou? Su Tong once again asked about the news that he was concerned about. This guy didn't know what the situation was now, and he needed to find him as soon as possible so that he could take advantage of his current status. Ji Xiang said that all the rats in the city have been mobilized and are looking for him. As long as Gao Zhou shows some clues, they will find Gao Zhou immediately. Gao Zhou was not found, but Ji Xiang said that he discovered the identity of another player. Oh, Su Tong raised his eyebrows. This is an unexpected gain. This time it is just a 4-person script. The script should not be too difficult, but I don't know what the situation of the other two is. It would be great to know the identity and background of one of them at this time. After asking carefully, Su Tong was a little surprised. This player was now in Zionjiu building, and she was also the popular girl in Zionjiu building, Qiao Xiaofeng. Interesting. Su Tong held his chin in his hand, wondering whether he should go to support him tonight. However, my father was afraid that he would go out and kept a close eye on him. From time to time, there were sounds of movement outside the door. The girl also knocked on the door after a while, asking if she wanted more tea or water, or if she wanted to tidy up the bedding. He almost shouted, "Open the door, madam asked me to come in and warm your bed. So if you want to go out, you'd better wait until later." It just so happens that this elixir is divided into 4 parts, and each of the 4 of us will have 1 share. Whether or not you can awaken your abilities depends on your own luck. Since being idle is idle, it is better to solve the problem at hand first. Ruyi Suk's and pill he was not going to eat it, so he divided it into 4 parts, kept 1 part for himself to make a Huazhong spring, and gave the other 3 parts to the 3 of them. "Thank you, master." Now Da Yat and the others were extremely excited. It was said that this kind of treasure should be given priority to the headmaster. The stronger the headmaster, the stronger the Tangguo talent would be. But Su Tong is not an old immortal, and he doesn't need any incense. Instead, he can feed them incense on weekdays. Ruyi Suk's and pill has little effect on him. Taking it by himself is equivalent to opening a random buff blind box, so it is better to give it to them. 3. Anyway, he had already made up his mind. Even if he couldn't awaken any abilities, he could at least enhance some strength. It was always more economical than opening a blind box. These 3 guys also have different eating habits. Da Ya took the elixir, spit out a mouthful of blue light and wrapped it around the elixir, slowly refining the properties of the elixir. According to her, this would ensure that the properties of the elixir would not be lost, and would be fully absorbed by his inner elixir, rather than simply being absorbed by the body. Absorb a large part. Jixiang was a bit more coquettish. He took a small pot, gathered the candles in the room together, and then made a wax hot pot. He took a knife, cut off a piece, rinsed it in the pot a few times, and wrapped it. Put wax oil into your mouth. He was obviously taking drugs, but this guy made him feel like he was eating Western food. Of the 3, the one I admire the most is of course getting rich. It is simple and rough, and it is as virtuous as Zhu Beiji eating ginseng fruit, without even chewing it to taste it. Perhaps it was due to the lack of potency after the elixir was cut, that none of the 3 awakened any new abilities. But Da Ya grew a new tail, and Ji Xiang's body shrank in size. In a short period of time, she lost her white hair and sprouted new hair. Although most of it was still white, there were still some black hairs mixed in. Hair. At first glance in the middle of the night, I thought this guy had become a national treasure. He was black and white, so he was quite worthy of his name. As for getting rich, it has been improved by 2 levels. Unfortunately, it is only 1 level short of gaining another ability. Su Tong thought for a while, and simply cut the piece on his hand into 4 parts, leaving only a small part for himself. Don't worry about the ritual, and just finish it in 1 bite. Although he admitted that he was gambling, he did not expect that he would be successful. After eating this small portion, Da Ya actually awakened a new ability, the art of fox charm. After Jixiang sprouted a few more black hairs, a pinch of fire actually appeared on the tip of his tail. As for making a fortune, this guy is rather unlucky and has not awakened any abilities. However, after advancing one level, he has reached level 9. In addition to the original skills of splitting and mimicry, he has an additional hardened defense ability. Overall, the harvest was pretty good. I left a little less, but it was enough to make my own Huazheng spring. Taking advantage of the auspicious hot pot, he sealed the elixir with wax, and after packing it carefully, Su Tong estimated that the time was almost up. He quietly opened the door and poked his head out. After making sure that no one was there, he tiptoed out. Walk. However, as soon as I walked 2 steps to the door of the private school, I suddenly heard a sneer from behind. "Master, where are you planning to go? No more tonight." Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 336. One hand is holding a crutch, the other is holding a volume of books, and is wearing reading glasses. Such an old man who looked like he would fall over at the first touch made Su Tong's heart skip a beat, and he was startled. Who is he? Why does he live in a private school? In the capital, officials of the first rank can live in a large quadrangle official residence with 3 rooms in the front, middle, and back, called a big house gate. For second-grade officials, there are 15 rooms, with 2 rooms and 3 rooms being the highest standard. There is only 1 room for third-grade officials, room 12. This jing can be understood as meaning Yuan Zongai Yuan, and Jian means the main hall. For example, Ma Chi's house is composed of a main hall, 2 wing rooms, a side room, a private school, 2 wing rooms, etc. The house is not big, but it has everything it needs. There is a small room next to the house door, where the night caretaker lives. There is a room next to the small room, an inconspicuous place, which is the private school room. If the family invites a teacher to teach, taught there, that's how the private school came to be. The servant Su Tong, who was the caretaker at home, knew what he was doing, but he had no impression of this old man. And this old man was unusual. He appeared behind him silently, and even De Yat and the others didn't notice it. He looked at it with his life eye, but found that he couldn't see the old man's luck. Feeling it with Chi Man, the result made him break out in a cold sweat. Human beings are the spirit of all things, and they are in subtle resonance with nature all the time. However, this old man's body was as still water, like a pool of stagnant water, isolated from everything around him. When asked by the old man, Su Tong thought for a moment and said calmly, "I'm upset. I want to go for a walk. I'll be back in a while." "Oh, okay, young master, leave early and come back early." After finishing speaking, the old man hugged the book and walked back, reading a poem as he walked. The light clouds are not clearing soon, and the trickling ditch water is silent. For pity, the path is green with new moss, and there is no wall shade to take the path. Su Tong felt relieved. The more panicked a person is, the easier it is to overthink. It's like a fugitive murderer eating in a restaurant and finding 2 policemen standing behind him. Even in the summer, he can feel a chill on his back. At this time, the policeman casually asked him, "How does this food taste?" The murderer is beginning to wonder, what does this mean, the last meal before arresting me? This kind of blind thinking makes people even more nervous. When people are nervous, they are prone to problems. In fact, people just ask casually. This is the result of poor psychological quality. The more natural and casual Su Tong behaves, the more normal he feels. If he panics, something might happen. Seeing that the old man was gone, Su Tong hurriedly walked out of the house, thinking as he walked, everyone said that the old man was hiding in the court, so this old man had hidden himself in my house. No wonder he reminded himself during the mission that if his life was in danger, it turned out that there was such a master in the Ma family. Surprised, Su Tong also found that his completion level had reached 99/100. Just a little short of it, his line of tasks was considered completed. After leaving the door, Su Tong asked Jixiang to lead him. He wanted to see what foreign steam cars looked like. After the foreigners used steamships to open the country and defeated the Bian fleet, Empress Dowager Cixin signed a series of treaties and even set aside a foreign zone in the capital. It has only been 2 or 3 years, and the foreigner area is already a bustling place, seemingly prosperous, but full of filth. Because this is a foreigner area, tax-free, and it is inconvenient for the government to come in, many people see opportunities. The largest gambling house is here, the largest prostitution house is here, human trafficking, tobacco and soil trading, everything is available here, only you can't think of it, there is nothing you can't find here. When Su Tong walked in, 2 students in long coats handed him a leaflet. When I picked it up and took a look, I saw that it contained a long article about how westernization would bring chaos to the country and so on. The person who wrote this thing had a good literary talent. He cited classics and enumerated the harms of westernization. But in his opinion, it is just a piece of garbage, which is too hard to throw into the toilet and wipe your butt. It's not that he worships foreigners, but he feels that this thing is written in a way that he can't even guess at, and he still expects illiterate people to understand it. It's no different from a heavenly book. As a propaganda leaflet, people can't understand it. It's nothing but garbage. Puff puff. Walking into the foreign district, Su Tong saw a steam car coming from one end of the street from a distance. The shape was no different from that of a car, except that there was a large water tank behind the car and a chimney that was emitting white smoke. The further you go inside, the more steam cars there are. What is different from the outside world is that this place actually gives Su Tong a modern feel. There are no lanterns on both sides of the street, but light bulbs. It is said that foreigners built a power plant on the North Canal. In addition to providing power to the palace, it mainly provides power to the foreign district in front of us. The dim lights illuminated the streets with crooked shadows. Some men and women with oriental faces had already put on long skirts and suits that looked like Westerners. On the contrary, my coat looked a little out of place here. "Boss, give me a bite." An old man lay tremblingly on the container and took out a few copper coins from his pocket. The boss fiddled with it a few times with a look of disgust on his face, counted the copper coins, and took out something like an iron kettle from the container behind him. The old man took the iron kettle and did not go inside, but went out and walked around to the backyard. Su Tong stood aside and was curious when he saw this. He followed him and took a look. He saw a separate place in the small courtyard behind. Several vents were opened in the wall, and these people took iron pots, put them over the vents and smoked vigorously, sucking out the cigarettes in the room and inhaling second-hand smoke to relieve their addiction. In the corner to the side, there were still 2 people lying crookedly and fully fed, without even a single piece of clothing on them. They were lying on the ground skinny, with nervous smiles on their faces from time to time. Su Tong used the fate icon to see the fate of these people, but he only saw a skeleton. He shook his head and turned around to walk out of the alley. As soon as he came out of the alley, he saw a group of men and women in rich clothes walking into the opium shop. Su Tong looked around and found that one of them still had official luck. He was afraid that he was also an official. Not to mention officials, even the current emperor of Datong is also using this toy, and he also gave this toy a nice name, Fuxiao Ointment. Even the emperor behaves like this, which shows that this country is rotten to the core from top to bottom. Su Tong had no interest in these things. After seeing it, he continued walking inside. The purpose of his visit today was to see what the so-called steam guns and steam aircraft looked like. As a result, I didn't see anything after walking around. After asking Jixiang for a while, I found out that these things can be seen in the barracks near the foreign church. So I could only go to Zionjiao Tower in despair to take a look at the famous pretty Xiao Feng. As a result, as soon as I walked to the door, the street suddenly became lively. The red light shines, the gods assist the fists, just because the ghosts are in the central plains, they are trying to persuade people to follow religion, they are confident in heaven, they do not believe in gods, they forget their ancestors, men are incestuous, women commit adultery, ghost children are the offspring of their mothers. Su Tong looked back and saw a big red lantern leaping over his head, with a woman in costume standing on top of the lantern. Immediately afterwards, a group of women holding lanterns poured out of the street. They were one after another, their hands shaking red silk, and they looked like they were performing street acrobatics. When some people who knew about the Red Lantern cult saw this, their faces changed and they turned around and ran away, fearing that they would be killed as foreigners if they ran a few steps too slowly. There were also some who didn't know what was going on and stood on the roadside watching and applauding, thinking they were just watching the fun. There were many foreigners among them. They didn't understand what was being sung, so they followed behind them with their cameras. Seeing the excitement, Su Tong simply followed him to see what this group of people was going to do. The red light shines, the world is safe, the Holy Mother comes out, everything is fine. This huge group of people headed straight towards the church. When the foreigners in the church heard the commotion, they came out one after another and looked at the red lanterns in the sky. They didn't know that a disaster was coming. They all shouted, "Brilliant!" Seeing the foreigners clapping their hands, the woman standing on the lantern suddenly pulled out a big knife and kicked the lantern forward. The lantern hit the church directly and exploded with a bang. Kill foreigners, maintain peace, ascend to heaven, and enjoy immortality. As soon as the slogans changed, a large number of lanterns were smashed down. The foreigners standing at the door of the church were instantly engulfed in flames and turned into burning men one by one. Following closely behind, the young ladies who were enjoying themselves just now drew their swords and rushed into the church, killing everyone they saw. "Headmaster, do we want to help?" Dia stood behind and asked. After all, he had no good impressions of these foreigners, whether from the perspective of missionary work or the invasion of the country by foreign devils. Humph, just watch. To be honest, Su Tong didn't have a good impression of the foreign devils, nor did he have a favorable impression of the Red Lantern sect in front of him. He had read the script. The Red Lantern cult usually went from house to house begging for rice and money. If he didn't give it, he would be labeled as a traitor. After being dragged out, he would be chopped into pieces. He was arrested several times with official uniforms. The strange thing is that every time these people looked like just like getting the news in advance, they will disappear when the officers and soldiers encircle and suppress them. If that's the case, that's it. Their method of winning over believers is nothing more than deception. There are countless cases of using incense ash as magic medicine to deceive people. Especially when I heard their slogan, I felt that this group of people was more shameless than Liangshan Green Forest. As I was watching, I heard a buzzing in my ears. Looking up, I finally saw the steam aircraft I wanted to see, but when I took a closer look, I felt doubly disappointed. Is this thing also called an aircraft? The aircraft in my imagination should be similar to the flying soldiers in the game Red Alert, but the aircraft in front of me looks like that. But in fact, it is just a process of jumping up high with a jet, using the steam jet behind it to temporarily push people up to a height of 2 to 3 meters, and then slowly landing. However, these are auxiliary troops, because there is a camp near the church. Seeing that the church was burning, the foreigners naturally quickly sent out troops. In addition to the steam cars, there were also musketeers armed with muskets. The muzzles of 2 small caliber cannons exploded directly into the crowd, instantly turning them into bloody messes. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 337. When the red light shines, the world is at peace. Kill the devils and ascend to heaven. I don't know who shouted this, but the women with swords rushed towards the muzzle of the gun, and naturally they were beaten into pieces. After several rounds, some people finally realized that this was a way to die. They dispersed immediately and rushed into the surrounding shops and restaurants. No matter who was inside, they would kill anyone who dared to block the way. Before leaving, they did not forget to throw a fire. Burn the buildings to cover their retreat. Su Tong hid in the corner and watched. He saw fires burning everywhere and chicken feathers all over the ground. He couldn't help curling his lips and turned around to leave. After walking a few steps, he suddenly heard something. He glanced sideways and saw a foreigner hugging a man in the church. He ran out with a big bag and listened carefully to the faint cry for help coming from the bag. Huh! Su Tong raised his brows, as if he had discovered something interesting. He watched the priest in black robes running out, and followed him silently and quietly as if melting into the darkness. These damn barbarians, God will punish them. Harold looked back at the burned cathedral, and he wanted to catch these barbaric women and send them to a punishment center. But fortunately, although the church was destroyed, the most important thing was still saved by himself, otherwise all his hard work in the past 2 years would have been in vain. Thinking of this, Harold glanced at the bag on his back and could hear a faint voice inside calling for help. "Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I will send you to His Highness the Pope and make you a saint that everyone respects." Harold's Chinese pronunciation is very strange, as if every word has 4 tones, which makes people feel weird. After saying that, no matter how hard the little guy in the bag struggled, he planned to walk towards the port with her on his back. He has already contacted Caobang's cargo ship. As long as he reaches Tianjin along the North Canal, he can take a steamer from Tianjin to Europe. It will only take more than 10 days to reach Europe. When he thought of this, Harold's steps became lighter. When he arrived at the port, he saw a big ship waiting for him. With joy on his face, Harold jumped onto the deck and shouted to the boatman sitting on the bow, "Quick, start! Start!" But the boatman ignored him at all. Seeing this, Harold turned to the other man and shouted, "Create! Headmaster, the things in the bag behind this guy are so strange." Not far away, Su Tong followed him all the way, hiding in a dark corner and watching. De Ye reminded him that there seemed to be a special aura on the priest's back, which seemed to be a special aura against their fairies. The same thing made her feel scared. Su Tong looked over with the help of his Minjian Kimen, and found that there were not only fishermen on the boat, but also many people hiding in it. There was a faint yellow aura in it, as if there were dragons hidden inside. Looking at the priest's side, there is already a dangerous wall of luck above the priest's head, which is about to collapse and may fall down and kill him at any time. As for the bag that Dia was talking about, Su Tong looked over it, and although he couldn't see the destiny, he used his Kimen sense to find that the contents of the bag resonated strongly with the surrounding nature all the time. While watching, a group of people walked out of the cabin. Unlike the barefoot boatmen on the boat, these people wore tight-fitting military uniforms. Under the night, the blades on their hands shone brightly under the moonlight. "Father Ha, I have said many times that if you want to preach here, you must learn Chinese well." Hearing the ridicule, Harold first took 2 steps back, and then took a closer look. When he saw the faces of the group of people in front of him clearly through the moonlight, he was shocked. Mr. Long Wu. Harold recognized this man, and could even say that he was familiar with it, because his church was completed quickly with the generous funding of Long Wu. And in his impression, Mr. Long Wu can be said to be a very helpful believer, and even helped him complete the baptism himself. "Mr. Long Wu, what are you going to do?" Harold looked at Long Wu and others with his mouth wide open. "Oh, Father Ha, please don't get me wrong. I heard that you were preparing to leave, so I came here especially to see you off." Under the night, half of Long Wu's face was hidden in the shadows, and the other half was illuminated by the torch, showing a kind smile. Speaking of which, I have invested a lot of money in you over the years, you can't leave in such a hurry. Mr. Longwu, this is not an investment, but a donation to the Lord. Besides, I also helped your shop and opium den, and got the protection of our holy see, didn't I? Harold looked seriously and corrected Longwu's statement. The emperor allocated a large amount of land for them. In addition to the capital, there were similar places in Tianjin, Wuhan, Jiangnan, Shanghai, etc. for them to do business and preach. But there are too many of these places. Although they are the owners of the land, most of the people walking on the land are Chinese people. Most of the businesses on these lands are joint stock systems. Foreigners can be shareholders, let Chinese people manage it, and just pay monthly. Only the capital side is different. Because of its own guarantee, all Longwu's properties are in the name of the church and there is no need to pay any company. It was precisely because of the protection of the church that Longwu's business was able to become a dominant one. In Harold's view, the little money Longwu invested was nothing compared to the benefits gained. Well, what you said makes sense. Don't worry, I'm just here to give you a gift as a friend. Longwu nodded and pointed to the ship at his feet. As a friend, I have specially prepared a ship of tea and porcelain for you. I think you will like these things. I hope that when you take them back, you will be more beautiful in front of God. Say something nice to me. A smile suddenly broke out on Harold's face, and he stepped forward and gave Longwu a big hug. You are so generous, God will definitely bless you. Longwu patted Harold on the back. Oh, by the way, do you still remember what we said when we first met? Harold was stunned for a moment. That happened a long time ago, and of course he didn't remember it. While he was thinking, Harold suddenly felt a stabbing pain in his chest. He lowered his head and knocked, only to see a golden cross inserted into his heart. Longwu took off the cross from his chest and pushed Harold to the ground with a hard push. I said at the time that we have a lot of good things here, but you can't take any of them away. You. Harold's eyes widened as he watched the sword-wielding warriors approaching. He let out a scream of fear, and suddenly there was a sound of chopping meat on the deck. Longwu took out the white silk scarf from his sleeve and wiped the blood on his hands. Someone untied the sack that Harold brought with him to take a look. Inside the sack was a little girl who looked 7 or 8 years old. The girl looked at Harold, who had been chopped up beyond recognition, with horrified eyes, tears welling up in her eyes. Haha, I thought this guy brought some treasure, but it turned out to be a doll. Longwu spat coldly at Harold on the ground, stepped forward and pinched the girl's chin to examine her. It's a pity, she's still a little beauty. My lord, please kill me. An attendant from behind came over holding a knife, but as soon as he opened his mouth, he called Longwu prince. What a pity it would be to kill him. Longwu rejected the attendant's idea, but changed his tone. We will sink the ship together and treat it as a burial for Harold. After saying that, he took the people off the boat. The boatmen on both sides picked up hammers and chisels and soon dug a hole in the boat. Notify the Holy Mother of Red Lanterns and ask her people to leave the capital as soon as possible. After tonight, it will be too late to leave. Longwu looked back at the sinking ship, got up and got on the sedan. After Longwu and his party left, Su Tongke emerged from the darkness and frowned as he looked at the sedan chair going away. Who would have thought that a dignified prince could run so many shady activities behind his back? Looking at the sinking ship again, my mind moved and I jumped into the water. At this moment, the girl was curled up on the deck, looking at the river water that was beginning to overflow from the cabin. When she was at a loss, she suddenly heard something in her ears. I saw bubbling in the river, and a shadow covered with algae gradually emerged from the water. Kind boy, is it this dead priest you are throwing away, or this ghost priest? The shadow made a hoarse voice, holding an unrecognizable corpse in his left hand, and holding a vague shadow in his right hand. Upon closer inspection, It was Father Harold she was familiar with. The girl had never seen the scene before, and her nerves were already extremely frightened. At this moment, she simply fainted with a single sound. Why? Su Tong brushed away the algae on his face. Don't all girls like fairy tales? But it didn't matter if he fainted from the fright. So as to save himself the trouble, he threw the body into the water, picked up the girl with one hand and jumped onto the water bank. The fire nearby is getting bigger and bigger. Obviously, the idea of going to Zionjiu building today is definitely not feasible. Just carry the girl and walk home. When I got home, the servants at home were already awake. It wasn't because they were diligent, but because the master was going to the palace in a while to work on errands, and they had to prepare all the meals before he went out. Seeing Su Tong coming back all wet, the servants were startled. When they saw that the young master was carrying a little girl on his shoulders, they couldn't help but look ambiguous. Knowing that the young master loved this, no one dared to speak out. Get a basin of hot water, wash up, put on clean clothes and send me to my room, and prepare some food for me. After handing the girl over to the maid, Su Tong was about to walk to the room. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly remembered something and glanced at the private room. He picked up a servant and pointed to the private room. "Mister, are you up?" "Old sir." The servant was stunned for a few seconds, glanced in the direction of the private school with a strange expression, and then looked at his young master. "Master, are you talking about Mr. Wen Yuan? Hasn't he been dead for almost 2 months? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 338. Su Tong didn't say anything and led the servant into the private school. The layout of the private school was actually similar to that of the study. I didn't know if the functions of the two were the same, so I chose the homophony. Su Tong walked in front, and the servant followed behind. Just when he was wondering, Su Tong, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped suddenly. The servant almost bumped into him. Just as he stabilized his pace, he instinctively raised his head to see. Look at what happened in front of you. Why did the young master suddenly stop? As a result, Zheng and Su Tong glanced at each other and looked at each other. The servant felt that the young master's eyes were filled with rainbow light, and his whole consciousness became blurred. This is the new ability that De Ya awakened, the fox charm technique. The servant was stunned, and before Su Tong could speak, he told all the information he knew. It turned out that Mr. Wen Yuan had an unusual background. When he was young, he won 3 consecutive top prizes in the imperial examinations, which was an unparalleled success. However, the unlucky thing was here. It is said that a fraud case was exposed in the examination room at that time, and one of his friends was caught. As a result, in order to get rid of the crime, the friend dragged him, the #1 scholar, into this dirty water. Now things are in trouble. Things have gotten out of hand. After all, Ankh has been the champion since ancient times. The emperor was asked to select among the top 3 and hand appointed him as the #1 scholar, so people said that the #1 scholar was Wen Kuxing who descended to earth. According to the emperor's disciples, if it was really cheating, it would be tantamount to slapping the emperor's face. At that time, the late emperor was furious, and without waiting for the investigation to reveal the truth, he put the person in jail and announced the abolition of Ankh's re-examination at another date. Finally, after waiting for half a year, the investigation revealed that this matter had nothing to do with Wen Yuan himself. But at that time, the #1 scholar had already appeared when the examination was reopened. The emperor couldn't order 2 #1 scholars. After all, this was related to the country, the royal family, not the princess or white horse of KTV. If you have money, You can order as many as you want. In addition to the so-called emperor's golden words, even if you know that you have been framed, you can't let the emperor admit his mistake. The emperor is right, and it is your fault. As a result, this man who was supposed to be the #1 scholar was deposed. It is said that he was in a daze after that, and some people said that he had gone crazy. It happened that when Ma Hongwen was 7 or 8 years old, the Ma Qi family came to Beijing, and they saw Mr. Wen Yuan on the way. Ma Qi and Mr. Wen Yuan were both fellow villagers. After learning about Mr. Wen Yuan, they simply invited the homeless man to visit him. The old beggar for many years became a teacher for Ma Hongwen. From now on, I will live in Ma's house, have no worries about food and drink, and still have some money every month. Mr. Wen Yuan was very attentive to teaching on weekdays. Although Ma Hongwen was arrogant and domineering, he still had some respect for this old gentleman. Just 2 months ago, the old gentleman suddenly passed away. Ma Qi was quite sad, so he put up a sign in the schoolroom and asked his servants to offer 3 sticks of incense every day, and treat him as a member of the Ma family. In the same way, even if people with other surnames cannot enter the ancestral hall, they still have a feeling of incense after all. After the servant finished speaking, he regained consciousness. However, he had no memory of what he had just said. His memory was still at the moment when he entered the door. Looking up, he saw Su Tong holding 3 yellow incense sticks in the incense burner on the table. There is also a sign standing behind the incense burner, which reads the position of Meng Master Zhang Wen Yuan. Hey, maybe I'm dreaming and missing my husband. Su Tong sighed and dispelled the doubts in the servant's mind with one word. The servant's doubts were dispelled, but Su Tong had more doubts in his heart. Was he afraid of ghosts? No, it is a miracle that ghosts are not afraid of themselves. But last night, when Mr. Wen Yuan was standing there, he didn't notice the aura of a ghost on him at all. Instead, he was just like a living person. Thinking of this, he deliberately looked at the entire room with his life ikumen, but saw nothing. I simply went back to the room to change clothes. The life of rich people is different. As soon as they entered the door, the 2 girls were shocked when they saw Su Tong's wet appearance. The eldest grandma has repeatedly warned the young master to take care of his wounds carefully. Unexpectedly, in the blink of an eye, the young master turned himself into a drowned rat. This frightened the 2 maids, fearing that if the young master did something bad, they would not escape the end of being beaten to death with sticks. Oh, one thing to mention here, servants who can enter the mansion to serve others have basically signed a contract. Life and death are in their hands. Even if they are beaten to death, the government will not take care of them. So the 2 girls were making ginger soup, boiling water, and helping Su Tong take off his clothes and wrap him in a quilt. Until the water is hot, come and wipe his body with hot water yourself. These 2 pairs of dexterous little hands were touching around his body. If Su Tong had no reaction at all, how could that be possible? He was not Beiji. However, the 2 girls were already used to this, and even blushed and praised, "Master, you are so fair." Even though Su Tong was so shameless, being teased like this by 2 girls made him feel a little nervous, but fortunately he didn't forget that his side mission had not been completed yet. He raised a girl's chin with his fingers and glanced at the girl's collar with squinted eyes. "You only see that my skin is white and my flesh is tender, but you don't know that, young master, I also care about my beauty." As he said that, he picked up the girl's hand and rubbed it back and forth in his palm. "Can you understand dance skills and music?" The girl's face turned red when he rubbed it with his hands, and she nodded with a smile on her face. After saying that, Su Tong suddenly looked out the door and seemed to sigh, okay, it's going to snow soon." Hearing this, the girl trembled all over and suddenly remembered that last winter, when those maids were frozen alive and turned into ice sculptures, her face turned pale. Su Tong looked sideways at her trembling body, with a smile on his face, and gently stroked her head with his hand. Unfortunately, I will go to the palace soon to serve as an errand. Tomorrow you can go back to grandma's place to serve me. I won't support you two idlers here, so get out. The two maids felt as if they were being pardoned when they heard this, and hurriedly ran out of the room with a basin in hand. When they left the door, the girl who had been held by Su Tong immediately burst into tears. When the servants passing by saw this, they were already used to it. How could they not know what kind of virtue their young master was? Except for Duan Cheng, who could figure out the young master's preferences, no one else faced the young master and knew what he was going to do next. What's the mood? When the two girls walked away, Su Tong immediately received a reminder from the prop book. The side mission has been completed and you have received a temporary identity bonus reward. Please choose one among them. 1. Wealth bonus. After choosing, you will get a windfall every once in a while. 2. Luck bonus. Your luck will be temporarily improved after the bonus. 3. Official luck bonus. You will get official luck after the bonus. Su Tong didn't think twice and directly chose the luck bonus. He was not short of money. His mother gave him 200 taels of silver notes. Their family was destined not to be short of money. He had no interest in being an official. Although luck was temporary, but not bad either. Master, it's a pity that you don't want these two pretty little maids. Dia leaned on the door frame of the hall and watched, giggling. Su Tong ignored Daya's teasing, put on his clothes and said, "You guys saw it last night, it must not be a ghost. What should it be? 9 times out of 10, he is the house god. Daya is worthy of being the woman behind Su Tong. She is well informed and has been an immortal for many years. She can determine the identity of Mr. Wen Yuan at this time. If a family has a house god, they will be blessed with descendants. This house god has the meaning of a god, but he is not a god. Strictly speaking, he should be a yin god. I think this old scholar has some talent and aura. He has been favored by your family over the years, and with the incense of your family, he must have become a yin god by chance." Daya is a bit disgusted. Humans are the leader of hundreds of spirits and have an inherent advantage over beasts like them. Even the ancestors of the Hu family did not have this blessing. As a result, a bookworm became a yin god in a daze. That's it? Su Tong understood. After a while, the two maids ran back again. After carefully placing the food boxes on the table, they brought in the little girl Su Tong had brought back. The little girl, who was only 6 or 7 years old, hid behind the two girls and looked at him with a fearful expression. But soon, she was attracted by the food on the table. His eyes widened as he looked at the food on the table, his stomach growling unsatisfactorily. "Master." The girl walked carefully to Su Tong and whispered a few words in Su Tong's ear. "Oh." After hearing the girl's words, Su Tong looked at the little girl again with a slightly strange look in his eyes. "Okay, you guys go down and go to the accounting room to get 10 taels of silver and tell me that I rewarded it. In addition, this matter. We don't know anything." These two girls were frightened by Su Tong just now, but now they are much smarter, for fear of making the young master unhappy again. Su Tong nodded with satisfaction and waved his hand for the two of them to go down. He immediately circled around the girl and pulled back the girl's hair with his fingers. He saw that there were dense green and purple scales on the girl's neck. "What is this?" Just now the maid said that she subconsciously thought it was ichthyosis, but when she saw it, it was really scales. The girl noticed Su Tong's gaze and immediately moved away. She hid in a corner with a wary expression. After darting around with her eyes, she grabbed the fried dough sticks on the table and ran outside. When the servants saw the girl running out, they stretched out their hands to stop her, but they heard Su Tong's voice from a distance, "Don't stop her, let her run." Looking back, I saw Su Tong Zheng following behind slowly, as if he was just strolling around, not worrying about how far the child could run. The child seemed to realize that no one was stopping her, so she ran out of the gate in one go and headed towards a crowded place. Huh? You're quite thoughtful. Seeing that this child knew how to use the surrounding environment to gain opportunities to escape at such a young age, Su Tong found it even more interesting and followed him leisurely, intending to see where the child could run. People in this era still have a very regular schedule, rising at sunrise and resting at sunset. Although it was just dawn, there were many people on the street. The girl looked back from time to time as she ran, and she breathed a sigh of relief when she realized that no one was catching up behind her. But when she turned around, she saw Su Tong sitting in front of the breakfast shop, looking at her with a smile. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 339. This startled the girl and she involuntarily moved back. Boom. The little girl you raised to play Ying is blind. A young man with a spiky appearance and a piece of dog skin plaster on his head pointed to the broken porcelain on the ground, grabbed a handful of the girl's hair, and started to curse her with words. The girl's face was pale, and she seemed to be frightened by the man in front of her. Even though Harold had banned her, he had never scolded her, let alone treated her so roughly. Facing such a ferocious man for the first time, the girl looked at Su Tong in a panic. However, Su Tong calmly drank the bean juice in his hand. He dragged the bowl with his hand and took a sip along the edge of the bowl without using chopsticks. Well, yes, it was sour. Take a sip and drink it with a sip of Coke ring. Although it tastes good, it is really not enjoyable for you. Most of them just put on a show and squint. Su Tong didn't care, and the people on the street were happy to watch the excitement. Some people wanted to come forward and say something fair, but they were dragged back. No, it has nothing to do with you. Why did you provoke him? It's not his fault. After chatting with everyone, I found out that this man's name was Tao Zi, and he was an old gangster from the neighborhood. With the support of people from the martial arts school behind him, he walked around the streets every day, eating and getting cards, and no one dared to do so. Provoke him. A few years ago, I fell in love with someone else's daughter-in-law and flirted with her. The other man was not happy and beat her up. As a result, in the middle of the night, Daisy brought people from the martial arts school to the door and beat her until she was beaten for half a year. Bed. When the people around him heard this, they knew it was a tricky idea, so they couldn't stand it and didn't dare to say anything. You broke my antiques, and even if you sell your mother it's not enough to pay for it, I'll beat you to death. Tao Zi felt angry when he saw that no one came out to recognize the child for a long time. He gritted his teeth and raised his hand and slapped her. With a snap, the girl's face became red and swollen at a speed visible to the naked eye. The girl's eyes were so painful that tears welled up in her eyes. Seeing that the man wanted to hit her, she opened her mouth anxiously and bit Daisy's wrist. Ouch! Tao Zi felt pain and let go. The girl hid behind Su Tong. When she looked at her wrist, she found a row of red marks on her wrist. Now Tao Zi's eyes became cold. When he saw the girl hiding behind Su Tong, he frowned and walked to Su Tong suppressing his anger. Is this your child? If it were another person, Tao Zi would have slapped him, but the young man in front of him didn't dress like an ordinary person. Tao Zi was thoughtful and asked first. Su Tong looked back at the girl and saw her looking at him pitifully, with hope shining in her black and white eyes. However, Su Tong stood up and waved to open the girl's hand. I don't know you, please continue. After saying that, he picked up the bowl in his hand and sat on the other side. Now the girl was dumbfounded. She thought this man would save her, but unexpectedly he just avoided him so lightly. His indifferent eyes were so indifferent that she felt a chill in her heart. Damn it, little girl, I'll beat you to death. Seeing that there was no one to protect him, Daisy became even more rude. He looked around, grabbed the rolling pin on the display board nearby, and rushed over. The girl's face turned pale with fright, and she hid behind her in confusion. Seeing that she had nowhere to hide, she suddenly heard someone say from behind her, "Others are going to kill you, so what's the point of running away?" As soon as the voice fell, I felt something was stuffed in my hand. I didn't even have time to take a closer look. I was kicked in the back first. I lowered my head and rushed forward, hitting Tao Zi's arms. Dazi suddenly stiffened, and the rolling pin in his hand fell to the ground with a clang. He looked at the girl who bumped into his arms in shock. The girl seemed to notice something. When she opened her eyes and took a look, she was immediately frightened and sat on the ground. I didn't know when a dagger appeared in her hand, and it was piercing Dazi's lower abdomen. The blood suddenly dyed Dazi's clothes red. The people around were also stunned. The murderers had seen them, and people lined up to behead their heads in Kashikau every autumn. But it was the first time for a child to kill someone in front of everyone. A few breakfast eaters sat watching and eating, winking at each other. "It's worth it, it's worth it, today's breakfast, it's worth it." Just when the girl was frightened and crying, a hand pressed on her shoulder. "Why are you crying? If you don't kill him, he will beat you half to death and throw you on the street. You will stink before tomorrow. By then, rats, bugs, and wild dogs will eat you until no bones are left. No one will avenge you." As soon as the girl looked up, she saw Su Tong standing behind her, staring at him with indifferent eyes, without any emotion, and so cold and inhumane. Not to mention she was a little girl, even the adults around her were shocked. It was a case that hurt people, but when it came to this man's mouth, she felt more like an animal and an ant. You wait, if I, Tao Zi, don't die today, I will kill your whole family." Tao Zi clutched his lower abdomen, and a short dagger could not kill him. He stood up tremblingly, with a look of resentment on his face that seemed to be real. With a relaxed smile on his face, Su Tong pulled the girl behind him. Tao Zi walked up to Tao Zi unhurriedly. Tao Zi's face changed drastically. After all, his cousin was from a martial arts school. He had never eaten pork and had seen pigs running. Naturally, he could feel the look on the face of the young man in front of him. The casual and natural demeanor is not deliberately put on. "What are you doing?" My cousin is from the Zhou family martial arts school in Dongcheng." You, don't mess around. The Zhou family martial arts gym is also a well-known martial arts gym in the capital. Since the death of the late emperor, foreigners have repeatedly invaded the country, and a martial arts school trend has arisen among the people. Originally, privately teaching martial arts was a taboo and was explicitly prohibited. But at this time, when the imperial court learned about it, instead of blaming him, he allocated a sum of money every year, called martial arts silver, specifically to these martial arts schools. It's only been a few years now, and Datong is already full of martial arts schools. Tao Zi thought that since he had reported his family's backing, the young man in front of him would definitely be concerned about the strength of the martial arts school and retreat when faced with difficulties. Unexpectedly, as soon as he finished speaking, Su Tong nodded, and as soon as he raised his legs, everyone felt a strong wind blow up, and as he flew out, landing squarely in the frying pan of fried dough sticks. The fried dough sticks guy was also unlucky. He had been frying fried dough sticks for half his life, but he didn't expect to be able to fry a living person today. The few diners in the back ate more deliciously, and today's breakfast was enough for them to enjoy themselves for a long time. Su Tong didn't care whether Dazi lived or died, and stretched out his hand towards the girl. "Go home." Now the girl became good behaved. She lowered her head and took Su Tong's hand, without the slightest thought of running away. "Why?" Seeing this, the stall owner who was buying breakfast hurriedly stepped forward to stop Su Tong. "You can't leave. You are committing a crime in the street. You can't leave. That boiling oil, regardless of whether the person who was rescued was charred on the outside and tender on the inside, his life would definitely not be saved. He was a breakfast seller and was involved in a lawsuit over his life. If someone left him, he would not be able to tell. Hearing this, Su Tong felt ridiculous and ignored the stall owner. Instead, he took the girl's hand and pointed at the people around him. Look, when they beat you just now, none of them stood up, but now they are running out to host its fair, just because you have no power and no support at all. When you die, you will be a piece of rotten meat on the roadside, and no one will care. As soon as these words came out, the faces of all the elders turned red with shame. Someone was unconvinced and said, "You are deceiving the public with your lies. This child broke other people's things and they were beaten to vent their anger. But you killed them. This is not the same thing. Yes, you must kill someone to get your life, so you can't leave." Seeing the support from everyone, the stall owner became more confident and at the same time sent someone to report the news to the martial arts school. Before anyone from the martial arts school could arrive, a passing official had already rushed over upon seeing the movement. He pushed aside the crowd and took a look. Oh, this thing exploded. It didn't turn over at first glance. Immediately, he looked at Su Tong and said with a serious face, "Who are you? How dare you commit murder on the street?" Seeing this, Su Tong curled his lips and smiled, holding the girl's hand and saying, "If I were powerless, I would have to pay for this guy's life today, or even destroy my family." The girl nodded as if she understood. Su Tong raised his head, looked at the two officials, and stretched out his hand as if to handcuff him. When the officer saw this, he took out the iron cuffs and was about to lock the person up, but the older officer on the side felt something was wrong and quickly stopped him. He took a step forward and said, "May I ask whose son you are? If you need to give him some money, bring a letter home." Su Tong bared his teeth and smiled, "Father Machi." The officer's eyes widened, his heart skipped a beat, and he cursed himself for being unlucky for meeting this ancestor. His face suddenly froze, as if he had been cast on a body-fixing spell. Su Tong casually threw down a bag of money, "Take it and treat it as compensation. If there is more, treat it as the legal fees I give him. Come sue him at any time. I will be at home at any time." After saying that, he took the girl and left. "My lord, all the witnesses and physical evidence are there, so you just let them go." Seeing Su Tong striding out with the girl, the stall owner stepped forward and asked in a low voice. As a result, the faces of both officials were darkened, especially the one holding the iron cuffs. He seemed to have a bad temper. He slapped the stall owner on the face, slapped him on the ground and cursed, "You are a blind thing, are your ears clogged with grass? Haven't you heard, Ma Chi, who is the leader of the Imperial Army? Who do you think you are? Get out, don't let me see you here in the future, otherwise I will catch you and put you in jail." A few days ago, these two officers would have had to think about who was Ma Chi. After all, there were too many officials in the capital. What's more, Ma Chi is a member of the Forbidden Army and is in charge of the Forbidden Palace. Most people have no access to this level. But 2 days ago, Ma Hongwen kicked a girl to death. This is not old news. None of the officials in the capital said a word. When their master heard the news, he didn't even fart and sent her away with a sigh. They had long heard about Ma Hongwen's background, and they had been discussing it during meals these days. Unexpectedly, I met the real master early this morning. If it were more than 100 years ago, when Emperor Yang was in power, even the son of a first-grade official would not dare to be so arrogant, let alone a third-grade official. Today's world has changed. Ma Qina is a popular person valued by the Empress Dowager Cixin. Yesterday, she heard that she was going to annex the Forward Battalion and the Firearms Battalion. This official position has not changed. She has an army of no less than 80,000 people. The Prime Minister, he doesn't have as much power as him. This was something that their master could not afford to offend. He looked sideways at Daisy, who was fried into a shapeless shape on the ground, carry them away, carry them away, carry them to their home. If you can, save them. If you can't save them alive, you will be in trouble. After saying that, he turned around and left without giving any money. The diner on the side looked at it, grinning and giving a thumbs up under the table. This show is really a meal, even more exciting than the one in the Liuan. Boss, 2 more bean juices. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shuigan Xiao. Chapter 340. The Ma family's servants saw the girl running out early in the morning. Not even 2 hours later, they saw the girl coming back obediently holding the young master's hand. In response to this, these servants looked at each other with ambiguous expressions as if the young master is the young master. Su Tong placed the girl in his home without asking about her origins or why she had been put into a sack by the foreign priest. She liked to talk about the past things, and it was pointless to ask herself. She gave her a fairly appropriate name, Liro, and she would be the maid in his room from now on. During this period, the eldest grandma came over. Although she couldn't hide the disgust in her eyes, who made Ma Hongwen her good son. She called the housekeeper to sign the deed for the maid, but Su Tong sent her away with just one word. No, I don't treat her as a servant. If she wants to serve her here, I can keep her. If I don't want to give her a sum of money at any time, she can go wherever she wants. The housekeeper didn't dare to say that he was disobeying his master. After all, the master was not around. Who dared to disobey the master's words? If he got angry and beat someone to death, the most he could do was to be punished by the master to kneel down in the ancestral hall, but the unlucky person would lose his life. The eldest grandma didn't take it seriously when she saw this. She knew that her son was very playful, so maybe it was just a novelty for a while. After a while, the enthusiasm disappeared. He was told to have a good rest and report to the Ministry of War in a few days, and not to let his temper run wild. As soon as the eldest grandma left, Su Tong went out on the back. The reason why he went out in such a hurry was because Jixiang's younger brother came to report that he had found traces of Gaozhou. It's in a small alley behind Dashiler in Beijing. Mouse can only find people, but he can't tell what Gaozhou's situation is now, but as long as he finds people, the rest are just small problems. As soon as I walked to Kinmen Street, I heard the sound of gongs. Under the escort of officers and soldiers, 2 prison cars followed. In front was a man with white hair, and behind were 2 women who were handcuffed in chains. Who is this person? Some people didn't recognize him, so they asked around. After asking around, they found out that this man was the commander-in-chief of the patrol battalion. Wasn't it true that a lot of people were killed by the Red Lantern cult in the foreign area last night? The patrol battalion is responsible for patrolling. One of them was pushed out to take the blame. It was said that he was put on death row and asked to be executed after the fall. Speaking of which, this guy was wronged. They were not allowed to enter the foreigner area, and the patrol camp couldn't control them. How did those people from the Red Lantern cult get in? What does it have to do with their patrol camp? But who told their patrol camp to be the Han Army? If you are not the one to take the blame, how can you expect those bannermen masters? As for the 2 women at the back, it is said that they were caught by the infantry battalion and sentenced to Lingqi. Su Tong stood aside and took a look. The 2 women looked dull and depressed, but they were not at all like the fanatics in the Red Lantern cult. But after thinking about it again, he understood what was going on. The patrol battalion is the Han Army, and the infantry battalion is the bannermen. Although they were both subordinates of the 9 admirals, one failed to fulfill his duties and the other caught the culprit. Everyone knew what he meant. Hey ha. Dashiler is one of the more prosperous commercial districts in the capital. There are many shops selling everything. Behind the grey wall, you can hear the sound of boxing practice in the early morning. There are several martial arts schools nearby, and they teach a variety of boxing techniques. For example, Xiaojiu Quan, Hua Quan, Bagua Quan, etc. Because of the presence of Yang Guiyin, these martial arts schools are doing well. The imperial court has also held martial arts competitions and advocated martial arts in recent years. Many people who have achieved academic success join the army and can be given official positions. If you want to make money quickly, go to the foreign area and do black boxing. After 3 or 2 games, you can earn a lot of money. Su Tong originally thought that Gao Zhou's identity might be a boxer from a certain martial arts gym. Finally, when I found Gao Zhou, I found that this unlucky guy actually wanted to play the role of an apprentice worker. The so-called apprenticeship is different from the formal apprenticeship. People pay money to come in to learn skills. You don't have the money to come in and do odd jobs. You will be given a dozen copper coins a month. When it comes to practicing martial arts, it depends on the mood of the martial arts master. Those with high emotional intelligence are called work-study students, while those with low emotional intelligence are called auditors. As soon as Su Tong entered the door, he saw this guy sweeping the floor. He had a thin face and a body so skinny that no flesh could be seen. Naturally, Gao Zhou didn't recognize Su Tong. When he saw someone coming, he immediately came forward and introduced him enthusiastically. "This brother is here to learn boxing, right? Then you have come to the right place. Our Hong family boxing gym is the first of the 5 major boxing styles in the south." After Gao Zhou introduced him enthusiastically, he saw the young man in front of him looking at him strangely. Although his face had changed, Gao Zhou recognized the playful look in his eyes at a glance. He was stunned for a moment and asked tentatively, "How did you find this place?" "Of course I'm here to find you, what else can I do?" Su Tong said angrily. Fortunately, last night when Foreigner Street was on fire, this guy sneaked into Foreigner Street quietly and released zombies to kill a few people. A mouse happened to see him arrive. Otherwise, I don't know how much effort it would take to find this thing. Gao Zhou looked him up and down and said, "Okay, look at your outfit, you are doing well." Just as Su Tong was about to speak, a figure came over and urged Gao Zhou impatiently, "Zhou Quan, what are you doing? The water tank in the woodshed is almost out of water. Hurry and get water." "Hey, okay, go right now, go right now." Gao Zhou blinked at Su Tong and hurriedly walked to the kitchen with his head lowered. Su Tong didn't have any good impressions of this guy who disturbed the reminiscences between himself and his teammates. He glanced at him coldly and saw the man with a deer head and mouse eyes. He was wearing a gray coat. He was only 1.65 meters tall. He was half a head shorter than him when he stood in front of him. This young master wants to learn boxing. The other party didn't notice the impatience in Su Tong's eyes and asked politely, "Not learn?" After Su Tong said that, he turned around and left, leaving the other party with a confused look on his face. When he came to the corner, he tossed his finger and a paper crane flew up from his fingertips and fell into the courtyard. Upon seeing this, Gao Zhou quickly picked up the paper crane and put it in his arms, looking as if nothing had happened. "Hey, what did you just say? Why did they leave? You must have failed to explain clearly. How many times have I told you that when others come to learn boxing, you have to invite them in first? Why are you so stupid?" The man who had just urged Gao Zhou to fetch water walked up to Gao Zhou, hit Gao Zhou on the head with his hand, and cursed loudly. Gao Zhou lowered his head and looked resigned, which made the martial brothers around him laugh. Even the gym owner sitting on the chair was full of cynicism. It's ridiculous that such a waste still needs to practice boxing. Everyone looked down upon this elementary school worker, but no one noticed that Gao Zhou had a murderous intent on his face with his head lowered. Su Tong did not go home. He made an appointment with Gao Zhou and waited for dinner at Nanhongshan in the evening. It's still early, and I'm just looking at the customs of this era. In reality, I didn't have the opportunity to go to the capital, but now I have the opportunity to be an uncle in the capital. It would be a waste if I didn't enjoy it. There are many interesting places in Beijing, and the most interesting one is of course the Bada Hutong, where you can eat, drink, have fun, and have all kinds of music. But he doesn't like to go. If it's fun, it can be more fun than the sand dance hall. If it's service, just find a bathing center, and a set of 998 will let you experience what it means to be eloquent. Everything is sold in dashiler, including red and white items. Su Tong passed by a longevity food shop, and when he went in, he saw that the craftsmanship was surprisingly good. The difference between this era and the previous script is that the old customs and traditions are flourishing, and the craftsmanship is also exquisite. When Su Tong inquired, it turned out that these stores had specialized craftsmen, and he also specially introduced Su Tong to the masters in their stores. As a result, at first glance, the other party was just an ordinary person, and he lost interest in an instant. In fact, this is natural. Although there are many real strangers in today's world, they would not hang around in a place like the capital if it is not necessary. Without the edict of Qin Tianjian, they would not leave their place rashly. It is not easy to meet one or two strangers on the street. Most of them are just making ends meet. Hey, isn't this Brother Ma? At this time, Su Tong suddenly heard someone calling him from behind. When he turned around, he saw a group of young people. These people were well dressed, and they all seemed to be of high status, but I had no impression of this group of people. When he was stunned, the other party had already walked up, especially the young man who was leading the group. He grabbed Su Tong's arm and said, "Oh, I heard that Brother Ma was assassinated not long ago. We brothers they all said they would come to visit, but I was busy with official duties and couldn't spare my time, so I didn't expect to meet you here." What a coincidence. This was a polite statement. Of course Su Tong would not take it at ease, but he still had a very happy expression on his face. "Thank you for your concern, but he is just a little thief and not worth mentioning." What a coincidence today. Brother Xiang and Brother Ma finally met each other. "When I call Brother Li, we can go to Ziwixian Tower to have a drink together." As soon as the young man on the other side spoke, the memory suddenly appeared in Su Tong's mind. His eyes flashed, and he looked at the young man in front of him and suddenly realized, it turns out to be him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 341. Xiang Keding, the sixth son of the Xiang family. Speaking of which, the relationship between the Ma family and the Xiang family is that of superior and subordinate. Xiang Keding's father, Xiang Gongbeo, is the Governor-General of Zhili province whom the imperial court most relies on today, and Ma Hongwen's father, Ma Qi, is a subordinate of Xiang Gongbeo. Later, it was only through Xiang Gongbeo's recommendation that he became the leader of the Forbidden Army. Location. Nowadays, Ma Qi has annexed the Vanguard Camp and the Firearms Camp, and has been entrusted with important tasks by the Empress Dowager Shenxi. On the one hand, the Eight Banners disciples are really in trouble. They want to stretch their hips as much as they want, smoke longevity ointments, and drink flower wine. Basically, they are just a bunch of people. Fight against the five scum. The Empress Dowager Shenxi then came up with the idea of recruiting Han people and retraining her troops. Ma Qi followed Xiang Gongbeo to the battlefield. This task was naturally her duty. More importantly, because of Xiang Gongbeo, the Empress Dowager Shenxi dared to carry out this task. A batch of troops and horses were handed over to Commander Ma Qi. It's a pity that Su Tong, who has read the script, knows very well that the Queen Mother Shenxi has been in power for so many years, but there are also times when she is dazzled. Putting aside this for the moment, the Siang Keding in front of him is the sixth son of the Siang family. Because he is close to Ma Hongwen in age, the two have a close-knit relationship. They usually idle around, and their group often gets involved in the trivial things that Ma Hongwen does. Thinking of this, Su Tong's face lit up with a smile, and the three of them went to Ziwixian Tower to have a drink together. During this period, another person named Li came, and Su Tong didn't know who it was. Several people exchanged glasses, and when the dishes were over, Siang Keding suggested going to the casino to play. At this time, the young man named Li waved his hand. What fun is there in the casino? Let's go see black boxing. That's exciting. Black fist. Everyone's eyes lit up. The trend of martial arts in Datong is now. There are martial arts schools everywhere, but there are no ones that really want to fight with real swords and guns. Every year, the Imperial Court holds a martial arts competition to commend the top 20 martial arts schools and allocate quotas for martial arts silver. The original intention is for everyone to compete and survive the fittest. As a result, the major martial arts schools have already formed a tacit understanding. The 5 major martial arts schools will divide the top 3, and the following 20 martial arts schools will divide the top 10. Everyone takes turns to be the master. The so-called martial spirit has become a business, which is already a tacit secret. If anyone dares to violate the rules, all the martial arts schools will ostracize the other party and directly drive the other party out of the capital. So if you want to see real kung fu, you have to watch black boxing. Does Brother Li have some connections? Siang Keding asked with a little surprise. Black box is very beautiful, but it's a pity that ordinary people can't find it without the connections. There used to be a family in the foreign area, but a fire last night burned down the black box store. It is said that the 9 sect admirals are behind that black boxing ring. Black boxing alone can earn you at least 1,000 pieces of gold every month. No wonder the commander-in-chief of the patrol camp is brought up to vent his anger. I saw Mr. Li calmly drinking a glass of wine. Yes. Okay, let's go see Black Fist. Siang Keding, as the one with the best family background among the 4, put down a silver ingot as soon as he slapped the table, got up and left with everyone. The 4 of them walked around and walked into an unknown alley. There was someone guarding the outside of the alley. Mr. Li was very familiar with the road. He threw a silver ingot over and led the 3 of them into the small door of the alley. As soon as I entered the door, I heard a burst of cheers. Su Tong looked around and saw that it was a very large yard. A ring had been set up in the yard. The houses on the surrounding sides had long been bulldozed and replaced with seats for people to sit and watch the battle. At this moment, the 2 people in the ring were fighting inextricably. Both of them wore masks on their faces, and neither of them showed their true faces, but their punches hit the flesh, and their moves were deadly. Mr. Li took them to sit down and whispered, "This place was originally the official residence of a prime minister in the past. It was abandoned later. I don't know who took over it. Now it has become a black boxing arena." Everyone was relieved when they heard this. When Siang Keding heard this, he couldn't help but frowned and said, "Hey, that official residence does black boxing. If it is found out, he will." When it comes to this act of sacrifice, he stretches out his palm and touches his wrist, making a beheading gesture. Black boxing itself is expressly prohibited, let alone using the official residence to do black boxing. The energy behind a person who can do such a thing must not be underestimated. But Mr. Li disagreed and said, "Never mind it, we are just here to watch the boxing, and we will not participate." As soon as Mr. Li finished speaking, Su Tong's face showed a strange look, because at this moment, he had already received a reminder from the script world. Side Mission 2, Black Boxing Arena. Mission Goal, win 5 black boxing matches. Task Time, none. Mission Reward, boxing proficiency add 40. There was no penalty for the task. It should be an ordinary task that could be done or not. But when Su Tong saw that there was a reward, he was immediately tempted. I redeemed the 5 animal capture hand at the exhibition, but it has proficiency, and if the proficiency is completed, it can be upgraded to the highest level LV3. After reaching the full level, there is a certain probability that the whole body's physical fitness will be increased by 15%. Isn't this a good opportunity now? In the ring, the two people have used their fists and feet to fight with weapons. Black boxing is a life and death fight. On the stage, even a father and son can only survive. Looking at the dark red blood stains on the ring, you know that this restaurant has just opened. Not long after, the black boxing ring was already covered in blood. The man in the black mask chose a short sword, while the painted-faced man opposite chose a large sword. Dagger versus broadsword, there's no chance of winning. Xiang Keding frowned. After all, his father was also a veteran on the battlefield. Even though he was competing with guns and cannons, Xiang Keding still had a basic understanding of martial arts. If a dagger meets a spear, it may still be useful, but if it meets a strong and swift broadsword, it is simply seeking death. But what happened next was unexpected. The black-faced mask covered the dagger with one hand, and his legs were close together and slightly bent. Facing the attacking sword, a harsh friction sound erupted from his feet. The figure rushed past the painted face like a rabbit in flight. Before the opponent's sword had time to cut it down, a hole was already stabbed in the chest by the dagger. Ouch! At this moment, everyone was stunned. After a brief shock, there was a burst of exclamations and curses in their mouths. It seemed that they did not expect that they had been fighting back and forth with bare hands just now. How could it be over with just one move with a weapon? A layman looks at the fun, and an expert looks at the door. This is the true martial arts. Kill with one move and never hold back. If you can't kill with one move after holding a weapon, you are either evenly matched, or both are weak. Those with tattooed faces threw out their gambling tickets and yelled curses, while those with black faces danced with joy. Ba Jean Deo, yes, this person uses Wing Chun. Mr. Li obviously had a deep knowledge of martial arts and couldn't help but exclaimed when he saw this. Although He Lian used a dagger instead of the butterfly knife of the 8 Jean Deo, he was definitely not mistaken. It was the 8 Jean Deo and the Mabu Bao Deo of Wing Chun. What does this move look like? It's similar to the way Ip Man drives stakes in the movie. It's the same in daily practice. It looks stupid and dull. Only when it actually kills someone does it show its real power. Wing Chun? Never heard of it? Xiang Keding scratched his head, he was very unfamiliar with this boxing technique. Mr. Li explained, I once saw a person using Tianjin's small boxing style. I asked about it and learned it, but I failed to learn it. Mr. Li was obviously very sorry to mention this matter. Xiang Keding said oh and didn't care. Seeing that the scene was about to end, Su Tong said to go to the toilet, but everyone didn't care and just asked him to go back early. After leaving the stands, Su Tong looked around and ran straight to the other side of the yard, but was stopped before he entered. What are you doing? You can't go in from behind. Two sturdy men stopped in front of Su Tong and said with fierce faces. You too, if I want to box, how do I sign up? Su Tong asked with his hands raised. You. Boxing. The two looked at each other and immediately laughed, don't say whether you can fight or not. Anyone who wants to fight here must be a master with a name in the capital. You are not here just because you want to, so get out. The two big men said that they were about to throw Su Tong out with their hands, but before they could do anything, Su Tong had already bowed down to them with both hands. Suddenly, their eyes blurred, and they felt as if countless hands were pulling them behind them. Before their brains could even turn around, they had lost consciousness. Su Tong threw the two corpses into the prop book and walked towards the courtyard. As soon as I reached the corner, I heard two people talking. Zhao Ting, you can be considered an old man in our field. You will still behave according to the same rules later, understand? I understand, don't worry about it, manager, but... Oh, I understand your concerns. Don't worry, the people you are fighting are also our people. We should strike carefully. When the 3 rounds are over, you can just fall to the ground. 2 people behind the wall were talking. One was wearing a tight-fitting military uniform and the other was wearing a white coat. When Su Tong heard this, it turned out that he could still perform fake punches. But think about how normal things are. Anyway, no one knows him when he is wearing a mask. If he acts well, he can be used again and again. Obviously this is not the first time this martial artist has done this twice, so he must be an experienced master. After the steward left, the martial arts master sighed. He couldn't escape from this beating today, at least he would have to lie down for half a month when he went back, but at least it wouldn't be a waste of time, and he still had money. Thinking of this, he was about to reach for the mask, but as soon as he turned around, Zhao Ting's ears twitched and he noticed someone behind him. Without thinking, he turned around and raised his hand to punch him. Unexpectedly, the other party seemed to be deliberately waiting for his punch. He raised his hand, clasped his palm on his wrist, and first pulled back to release the force of his fist. Then he twisted his 5 fingers, and a heartbreaking pain hit him. He felt that the other party's body was clinging to his chest, and in an instant, Zhao Tingran flew up with a sweep, and he could hear a crack in his whole arm. Rattling sound. Grappler. This thought flashed through Zhao Ting's mind, but the other party didn't give him a chance at all. He knelt on his neck with one knee and knocked him unconscious with a punch. The whole process was as fast as lightning. For a practitioner like Zhao Ting, he was knocked to the ground without even seeing the other person's face clearly. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 342. Buy it and leave it. If you want to buy it, don't hesitate. The next match will be between the Tiger School Boxer and Xing Ai Boxing. Hey, why hasn't Brother Ma come back yet? Xiang Keting looked back at the empty seat next to him and couldn't help but murmur. It's okay, I'm afraid I have diarrhea, Mr. Li said disapprovingly, with a hint of ridicule behind his words. Although they all play together, they are proficient in horseback riding and archery. After all, their fathers are veterans on the battlefield, so they can play with muskets no matter how hard it is. However, only Ma Hongwen does not like literary and martial arts, nor does he like to play with muskets. He has long been drunk and debauched. Empty. If this was a young man from an ordinary family, they wouldn't tease him like this, but Ma Hongwen is Ma Chi's son. How could the only son of a dignified military commander not be ridiculed by everyone for being so poor? Brother Li. Xiang Keting naturally heard the implication of Mr. Li's words, and suddenly felt a little unhappy. After all, Ma Hongwen also grew up with him, and their parents had a lifelong friendship, so it was inevitable to feel a little uncomfortable after hearing this. Hey, let's start with the punches first. Mr. Li laughed, stopped the topic, and threw a banknote to the guy in the boxing ring. Suppress the Tiger Party for me. After finishing speaking, he didn't forget to ask Xiang Keting, would you like to play for a while? Xiang Keting felt unhappy and took out a banknote when he saw this. Suppress the Xing Ai boxing master. Hey, we are all brothers, good brothers, don't hurt your friendship. Seeing that these two were on top of each other, the man who came with them started to persuade them. But how can the two of them pay attention to a foil? It doesn't matter how much money they have, what's important is that they can't be suppressed like this. Boxer enters. The two boxers walked onto the stage. The tiger boxer was tall and mighty. His height of 1.8 meters was enough to be called a giant in this era, and look at the tendons on his body. Hey, the spectators in the audience who were pressing down on the tiger faction boxer were all jumping for joy. This is not a tiger section. Even if you say he is the reincarnation of a black bear spirit, some people will believe him. Looking at the Xing Ai boxing master again, those who bought him to win instantly turned black. With his thin body and frivolous pace, any coolie pulled from the dock was stronger than him. Ha 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 ha, this is really interesting. Mr. Li spread his fan in his hand, covered his mouth and snickered. Xiang Keting looked ugly and said nothing. From the moment the two boxers came on stage, the winner or loser seemed to have been decided in everyone's mind. Regardless of the boxing techniques, moves, differences in size and strength, they are innate. If the gap is small, perhaps you can use boxing skills to reverse it. But the gap is too big, and the so-called boxing skills are meaningless. This is a man who practiced martial arts at the age of 3. He practiced 3 volts in the summer and 3-9 in the winter. He practiced hard for 3 years, but he couldn't beat a 30-year-old man. Physical strength is ultimately the key to victory. Now on the stage, some people couldn't wait to curse the boxing ring for cheating money, but the boxing ring didn't care about this. The manager winked, and a few guards with sticks came out from the side, and no one dared to scold them. Seeing that the protest was ineffective, he had nowhere to vent his anger. He didn't know who threw the gambling ticket in his hand and said, "Beat him to death. Beat him to death, beat him to death, damn it made me lose money, beat him to death." Regardless of whether they are losers or winners, the shouts are deafening. Winning or losing has become a foregone conclusion. What everyone wants to see now is a bloody killing. Oh, what a pity. The steward walked across the ring, walked behind Su Tong, met the Tiger faction boxer's gaze, and waved his hand to wipe his neck. The Tiger faction boxer grinned under his mask. He already knew that he could have a good time in this fight. He nodded towards the steward and attacked first. A fast and fierce straight punch hit Su Tong's face, and at the same time, his other hand slowly moved back. Tiger boxing, also called Tiger Fist, was originally one of the 5 elements boxing. Later, someone picked it out separately and conducted further study and modification. Finally, it became a school of its own, imitating the shape of the tiger, taking the skills of the tiger, and integrating it into the boxing spirit. This straight punch was just a test. The real killer move was the tiger's claw-washing move. This tiger boxer obviously had enough confidence, thinking that even if the thin guy in front of him managed to receive this punch, he would still be able to do it. His hands and feet will inevitably be disrupted by his fierce strength, and then he will be able to seize the opportunity and cripple him inch by inch. When Su Tong saw this, he didn't take the punch. Instead, he stepped forward with his left leg. At the same time, he made a palm with his right hand, grabbed the opponent's wrist and pressed down, and used his shoulder to hit him with his shoulder. The collision was fast and accurate, but the difference in physique between the two made it feel more like an egg hitting a stone. But only the tiger boxer knew how powerful the collision was, like a dull punch hitting the chest. Hitting him so hard that his chest made a muffled sound. Now the tiger faction boxer knew that he was careless, and quickly grabbed Su Tong's ribs from below with his other hand. The 5 fingers are like hooks, and the fingers are spread out. This is the characteristic of Tiger's Unfist. However, Su Tong saw 6 directions, and pressed his left palm from bottom to top, pressing the back of the opponent's hand, and using the power of this claw, he pulled his wrist. Pulling back, he squatted into a lunge at the same time, exerting force on his waist, like throwing a shot put, and directly threw the person into the air and fell heavily to the ground. Boom, there was a sound. The audience, who were still shouting just now, immediately shut up. Even those who didn't understand boxing and were just amateurs who came to join in the fun were shocked by this scene. The physical strength of the two sides was far different than that of Lao Niu, but unexpectedly, within 1 round, the one who was thrown to the ground turned out to be the tiger boxer. Mr. Li, who was sitting next to Xiang Keting, looked like he had seen a ghost. He closed his fan in his hand and said, "Isn't this Xing I Quan? Why does this look like crane fist?" "Brother, you should not judge a person by his appearance." Xiang Keding originally had Wang Wang's expression, but in an instant the rain cleared up and the sky cleared up. He patted Mr. Li on the shoulder with the sincere words and said with a smile. Mr. Li's mouth twitched and he didn't know what to say. But everyone in the audience also realized what was going on. Did he grow so big in vain? He was thrown to the ground in one confrontation. Is this tiger fist? This humming thing is obviously catboxing. Su Tong did not take advantage of the victory and pursue it, but waited for the opponent to get up. At the same time, he glanced at his prop book and saw that the proficiency of the 5 capture hand had just increased by 3 points. This is much easier than Chi Men's proficiency. It seemed that he was thrown into such a dull state by a thin man, or because of the boos and yells from the audience, or even the murderous look in his eyes from the supervisor. The tiger boxer shook his head, jumped up suddenly, opened and closed his hands, and with one move the evil tiger came down the mountain and rushed over. This time he was determined to cut this guy into pieces. But what he didn't expect was that Su Tong didn't sit back and wait for death this time. Instead, he took the initiative and grabbed the opponent with both hands. The power exploded from his thin arms was simply terrifying. He, a 1.8-meter-old man, was caught when he closed his wrists. He immediately felt that his hands seemed to be covered with iron bands. Before he could struggle, Su Tong pulled his fingers back, pulled him forward, slid his hands along his arms to his elbows, and kicked him high on the chin. Close combat skills. Even though Su Tong has dealt with this prop card, he can still remember the combat skills routines. She twisted her body and turned diagonally from his armpit to his side. The opponent's arm was also twisted behind his back, and she raised her leg and kicked him on the shoulder. Kaba! The curses from everyone in the audience suddenly stopped. They could clearly see that the left arm of the Tiger faction boxer had been hanging down weakly, and the entire joint had been dislocated. But it was not over yet. Following a set of short blows, the punches hit the flesh. Everyone could not help but have an illusion, as if the Tiger boxer was like an extra-large sandbag. He was beaten so hard that he screamed and was finally beaten by Su Tong. He was kicked out of the ring with a side kick. Accompanied by the sound of a heavy fall, everyone was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly burst into deafening shouts. Those who threw the gambling tickets on the ground just now jumped up from their chairs like vicious dogs and pounced on the discarded gambling tickets on the ground. How cool they were when they threw them away, and now they are picking them up. How embarrassing. The steward almost bit his gums to bits. He stared at Su Tong with cold eyes, walked behind Su Tong and cursed in a low voice, "Idiot, you are crazy. I agreed that you would lose, but you." Su Tong narrowed his eyes and looked at the steward. The teasing look under the mask made the steward feel uncomfortable. Su Tong sneered and said, "I don't want to serve you anymore. If you have the guts, continue to let others come. Either beat me to death or be beaten by me. Die. If I don't die, I will kill your whole family tonight." "Madman, you are crazy." The steward was frightened by Su Tong's tone. He could feel that the other party was not joking with him, and his face turned cold. "Okay, you have the guts, just wait." After saying that, he angrily walked to the back and talked for a while, and soon the second boxer came on the stage. Now everyone was betting wildly on Su Tong's side. "How's it going, Brother Li? Will you continue to press?" Xiang Keding asked Mr. Li beside him with a smile. "They are all children of wealthy families. If you want to bet, bet to the end. Money is a trivial matter, but face is important. Whoever is a coward is a dog." He took out the banknote and gave it to the clerk to press it down, but it was the boxer opposite Su Tong who pressed it down. With the steward's instructions, the new boxer struck hard with his first move. Su Tong didn't use any other abilities and even threw and punched him. The opponent was knocked off the stage before he could hold on for 3 rounds. The person in charge was no longer angry now, but his face was so gloomy that it looked like it was about to drip. 2 more boxers were sent out, but the result was still the same. He won 4 games in a row, which was not enough for Su Tong, but it was already getting dark and the 5th boxer still didn't come on stage. The spectators below were getting impatient. They took their gambling tickets and began to exchange money. Looking at the money being exchanged, the steward's body began to tremble as he stood in the cold wind. After asking around, the other boxers refused to come on stage no matter what. Su Tong glanced at Xiang Keting and others who seemed to be unable to sit still, and sighed. Just as he was about to leave, his ears suddenly twitched and he looked sideways to see a man without a mask strolling onto the ring. The moment their eyes met, Su Tong immediately recognized him. It's him. The person in front of him was none other than the 4th player, the man in a suit sitting on the sofa who looked very formal.